Hello, I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor.
You look a little strange today, Ken.
I'm in an evil frame of mind, John.
Snap out of it. It's time to do philosophy talk.
I'm not talking about my mood. I'm thinking about evil, our topic for today. Why is there so much evil in the world?
Well, what's surprising about that? What did you expect? The world suffused with goodness?
Well, yeah, sort of. Look, if the world was created by a supremely powerful, supremely loving God, he has the power to stop evil, and shouldn't he have the will to stop evil? But there's all this evil. And if there's no God, then there should be no such thing as evil at all, right?
You've talked yourself into a fine mess, Ken. Let's see if we can rid you of some of your demons when Philosophy Talk continues. After the news.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the studios of 91.7 FM, KALW, San Francisco's oldest and by far most innovative public radio station.
Continuing conversations that began at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus.
And today we're going to talk about evil, John, the problem of evil.
Yeah, now let's first think about who's it a problem for? And at least one theme that I'm sure we'll hit is the connection between evil and God. There's lots of abstract arguments philosophers use to convince people that there is or isn't a God, but among ordinary people, ordinary thoughtful people, there's two big ones, right? Why is there good in the world? Well, that's the argument from design. Somebody must have figured out on a sunny day on the beach, when you're picking fruit off a tree, it's hard to believe that somebody didn't design this for us.
Yeah.
But if there is a God in charge of things, why is there so much bad stuff that happens? So much evil? Why is there a Holocaust? Why is there AIDS? Why is there Jeffrey Dahmer? Those are questions that have led people to doubt the existence of God.
I think that's really one of the most powerful. If God has all this power, he can stop evil. If he has all this goodwill, all this benevolence, he should will to stop evil, but he doesn't do either. So how could there be such a thing? But some people say, especially religious people say, look, if there is no God, then, as Dostoevsky has one of the brothers Karamazov say, everything is permitted. And that means, I guess, there's no distinction between good and evil because it's all just the whim of man. So, the very fact of evil argues for the existence of God, don't you think?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm not fully convinced that evil is something that requires God to exist. I'm a little like Potter Stewart was with respect to pornography. He said he doesn't know what it was, but he knows it when he sees it. Well, I don't have a definition for evil maybe, but I know it, and I think it's there even if you don't believe in God. I heard a Holocaust victim interviewed on the radio yesterday, the 60th anniversary of the closing of Auschwitz, and that's evil. The stuff she described was evil, and you don't have to go to Auschwitz to find evil.
You're certainly true. And when you're saying the stuff that she described was evil, that means it's beyond. You're suggesting, and I think you're right, it's beyond ordinary badness. Cutting somebody off in the street in traffic is bad, right? But killing millions of people is more than just bad. It's evil. And calling something evil is a really special kind of act, I think. You're expressing a really negative attitude toward someone when you call them evil.
Well, to me, I think evil lurks in the hearts of at least some men, and I think it's there, and women too, I suppose. I think it's there whether God exists or not, but we'll learn more about that.
Yeah, and you don't have to go, and I think you're right, it lurks everywhere. You don't have to go back to Auschwitz or over to Somalia or any of these other awful places in the world to see evil. You can see it right on our own streets. And Amy Standen is talked to somebody who's rubbed his face in evil. She files this report.
If you work in law enforcement, you don't have to go far to confront evil, or what often looks like it. At least that's the case with a detective I talked to named Cliff Harris. Harris has done police work for years, including stints on homicide and domestic abuse cases and the Division for Crimes Against Children. I asked him what that work was like.
It entailed investigating cases involving alleged child molestation, child endangering, child homicides. It involved arresting suspects, writing search warrants, appearing in court, giving testimony, abandoned children, mothers under the influence of drugs, going to ER rooms and taking custody away from a mom, temporarily giving her to the courts, those kinds of things. In some cases, you had sad situations where you had incest that involved father with the mom's knowledge in some cases. Some cases you had professionals, firefighters who were suspects. And in some cases you had people of trust. When I say that, I mean people that were in the clergy that were molesting children. It was pretty disgusting. That brings a case to mind regarding a minister who had 7 daughters and had molested 6 of 7 daughters. And the only reason he had molested the 7th daughter was because she was too young. When you talk about evil, that, to me, was evil. Because of what he represented, because they were supposed to be people of trust. It's always devastating when you have people of trust violating that trust. Most vulnerable in our society are our kids. It takes an evil person to do those kinds of things. I can't think of another name to put on them.
So, what exactly is evil? This is Dr. Hunter McQuistion, a psychiatrist at New York's Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
It's a way for us to rationalize and describe our own fear and our own anger towards that person or a group of people, because otherwise we would be conflicted about being angry. If we can label them as evil, it makes it okay for us to be absolutely enraged. It makes them a separate class of being.
So, is there such a thing as an evil person?
No. Is there such a thing as a good person? There's good and there's evil. I mean, these are social constructs. You know, I mean, in the vernacular, we can say that there are evil people and there are good people. But really, on another level, what qualities are we talking about and what feelings of our own are we talking about as well?
For Philosophy Talk, this is Amy Standen.
Thanks, Amy. Informative and provocative as usual. Ken, I'm not too convinced by what the psychiatrist said. I mean, you could say big angry wolf is just a label we put on certain phenomena to rationalize our fear, but it seems to me that fear is a rational response to a big angry wolf.
Yeah, right.
Whether it's a label or not.
Yeah.
And I think evil is pretty bad stuff, no matter what you call it.
Bigger than a big angry wolf.
I'm John Perry here with Ken Taylor. This is Philosophy Talk, and we're talking about evil.
And we're going to be joined by our guest. Our guest today is Professor Peter van Inwagen. He's a professor of philosophy of the University of Notre Dame, my alma mater. He's written all kinds of stuff. I mean, all kinds of stuff. I won't try to list them all here, but something particularly pertinent to our talk today. He has a forthcoming book that'll be published soon, I gather, called The Problem of Evil with Oxford University Press. Peter, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk. Now, Peter, we've known each other for quite a while, and I've always had the impression you were a bit of a theist. But now you've written a book on the problem of evil. Is it reasonable to assume that having worked through the problem of evil, you've given up your theism, or if not, why not?
No, I haven't given up my theism. That is, I was an Episcopalian before I started to write the book. I'm an Episcopalian still.
But the question John's trying to ask you is,
in his feeble way,
is reconcile the existence of evil. Help us start to think about how to reconcile the existence of evil with theism.
Okay, well, look, I think the first thing to realize is that the word evil has 2 meanings, and one meaning is the kind that was talked about in your interviews there, or that we associate with Auschwitz and so on. Radical evil, Hannah Arendt called it. There's another weaker meaning for the word, though, as in the evil that men do lives after them, or sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, where it just means bad things. Now, I think the problem of evil as a theological problem, as a problem having to do with the existence of God, simply pertains to bad things. Why would, as John put it at the opening of the program, maybe it was Ken, why would an all-powerful, loving God permit the existence of bad things, and really bad things, and lots of them? Maybe radical evil among them, but of course the tsunami, for example, not being the result of the work of a moral agent is not going to be evil in that sense, but it's still a very bad thing, at least for the people that got in its way. Well, that's the question.
Right. Well, that's one question.
Yeah,
I think the other question causes more problem than you think, but let's deal with the question you asked first.
You make a very, very good distinction. It's sometimes the distinction between conscious evil or evil caused by humans and natural evil. But on the other hand, traditionally, wasn't there a view in Christian theology that natural evil is really just the evil of free agents that are bigger and, fallen angels, things like that?
Well, I mean, that's a view that's been taken by some Christians, I suppose. I don't know if it was ever actual doctrine.
It doesn't seem like a very live view now, although maybe it's more live than it used to be.
But Peter, you want to help us think about why an all-powerful, all-loving God, right, who's got the will and the power to prevent evil, right, doesn't do it, right, and how we can reconcile that with theism.
Well, as a philosopher, I like to talk about arguments. So we might look at this as an argument, right? Although I think it was asked earlier as a series of questions, but one might say, well, look, here's an argument for the non-existence of God. If there were a God, there wouldn't be all this evil, but there is all this evil, so there isn't any God. The conclusion of the argument follows from the premises. I'm not going to be one of these people that disputes the premise there's lots of bad stuff that goes on. So the only question about the argument is the premise true? That is, if there were an all-powerful being, there'd be no evil. Well, the question is, why should we believe that? Is that just so self-evidently true that there's no reason to reject it? Of course, lots of people have believed things of the same form that seem self-evidently true to them and doesn't seem self-evidently true to us, that the accomplishments of males in sciences and in literature and music are so much greater than the accomplishments of women that there must be men must be intellectually superior to women. That's just evident. It's not evident to us today, though, however evident it might have been to people in earlier days. I have a feeling that this premise about God and evil seems much more evident to people who aren't part of a religious community than it seems to people that are part of a religious community.
If I understand him correctly, you're in good company, or what I call good company on that point, because David Hume, as I understand him, says that, look, if you have a reason to believe in God, and you're convinced that God exists, then an infinite God, then you really shouldn't expect to have a clue what his plan for the universe is. And so you shouldn't expect to have a clue about how the things that happen might, in the long run of history and the great expanse of reality, turn out to contribute to other things that are good or whatever. On the other hand, Hume says, if you're not antecedently convinced and you're kind of looking for the best explanation of what you see, you would never come to the conclusion that the thing was designed by a perfect God. Do you agree with that line of thought?
You mean, if you looked at the mixture of good and bad in the world, you wouldn't infer from that it has an absolutely perfect and all-powerful maker.
Right, just like if you looked at the class.
I think I wouldn't infer that from even a much better world than this. That is the one that had a much more favorable balance of good over evil. And if someone did, I'd have to say, well, that's a very chancy argument. Maybe that's right. I don't find these design arguments all that convincing myself.
Well, I want to go back. I think you guys are letting yourselves off the theist off too easily, Peter. I mean, I actually didn't pose it as an argument against the existence of God, but I posed it as a challenge to the theist. Why do you believe in an all-powerful, all-loving, perfect God, right, as the creator of this world that's suffused with evil at every corner? Why do you believe that?
Would you think the world is suffused with evil at every corner? Haven't you ever basked in the sun on a nice day?
Yes. Okay, it's not suffused with only evil.
We don't mean absolutely homogeneous.
Yeah, right. But it's
ubiquitous.
It's
not
ubiquitous.
Homogeneous.
Right. Why do you believe that? Now, that's not an argument against your God. It's asked for an argument for your God. It puts the burden on you.
Well, I think, though, that you're saying that there's a strong prima facie case for the truth of that conditional proposition. That is, if there is a God, then there isn't a mixture of good and evil so heavy on the evil as we see in the world.
Right.
And so your point is equivalent to saying that the argument is a pretty strong one, because there can't be anything wrong with it but that premise, and that premise looks pretty good.
Yeah, and you don't think there's any I guess you don't think there's any challenge to you. You just can take it on face value that there's both evil and
that is what I would do is what I would do with any philosophical argument, discuss the premise, see how good the case is. That is, I'm not willing to take it as just so evident that the premise is true. It doesn't require discussion.
Okay, Peter, after the break, then, I want you to discuss the premise with me. And I'll tell our audience, you're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking with Professor Peter van Inwagen of the University of Notre Dame about the concept of evil. He's the author of a forthcoming book, The Problem of Evil. If you're in the Bay Area, you can join us by calling 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134.
Now, if you're outside the Bay Area, you still don't have to pay an arm and a leg to be part of our conversation. We have an 800 number, 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. And finally, a third option, send us email at comments@philosophytalk.org.
After the break, and a little bit after we get back to arguing our premise there with Professor Peter van Inwagen, we'll turn to the question of whether the notion of evil still makes sense as if there is no God. Do atheists can they really believe in evil? Well, let us know what you think. Philosophy Talk will be right back.
Evil is going on wrong. I am warning you, brother. You better watch your happy home.
Howlin' Wolf with Evil. Howlin' Wolf, kind of a gangster rap before his time, I think. I'm John Perry. You're listening to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is Peter van Inwagen of the University of Notre Dame. We're talking about evil, and pretty soon we're going to ask the question, can only religious people believe in evil? What about us atheists?
And you can, if you're in the Bay Area, you can call us at 415-841-4134. 415-841-4134. Otherwise, if you're outside the area, 800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. Or finally, comments at philosophytalk.org. Peter, let me see if I can get a little more visceral reaction out of you. You sound like an academic, but we're talking about people's fundamental beliefs and how they view the world. I heard a very fascinating interview yesterday with a Holocaust survivor, and what was, from a philosophical point of view, most interesting was what she said about God. She didn't say she didn't believe in God. She didn't say her experience had dissuaded her from believing in God. She said, I don't deny God, I don't question God, but I don't pray to him anymore. She was just angry with God. Doesn't evil upset theists if there's a personal God up there with such an opaque plan that it involves tsunamis? Doesn't it upset you?
Well, it isn't evils. It's evil. Evil isn't what upsets people. It's evils, particular evils that they or others have encountered.
Well, that's a good point.
We were talking about the problem of the very existence of the phenomenon. And B, of course, if there's an evil in the world, it doesn't follow that it's part of God's plan. I wouldn't concede that the tsunami was part of God's plan.
So does that mean God's not omniscient, doesn't know everything? Or just that his plan just doesn't cover everything?
Well, there's probably a lot of things that go on in your life that you could control that you don't. So from the fact that somebody doesn't do something about something doesn't mean that that's part of his plan.
Wait a minute. Okay, but look, God is supposed to direct this universe, this creation of his, toward the good. Ultimately, I mean, he's the providential force that directs history toward the good, towards ultimate fulfillment. And now you're saying, well, you know what? He kind of let that course of history be hostage to our human intentions. He says, well, you know what? If Hitler wants to go off and slaughter 6 million Jews in the run-up to history, well, that's okay by me. I mean, come on. Who could say, oh yeah, I applaud such a God. I believe he's supremely powerful, supremely loving, and providential. I mean, I don't see it, Peter. I don't see it.
The question is, are we going to discuss that argument, or are we going to discuss particular events?
What do you want to say about that argument?
I'd prefer to talk about the philosophical argument, to see if it's any good. Is it intellectually convincing?
Okay.
However people may feel about particular evils.
Tell me why it isn't any good.
Okay, well, suppose you've got an audience of absolutely agnostics, absolutely neutral agnostics, and you're an atheist maybe, and I'm a theist. We can imagine ourselves debating in front of that audience, each one trying to change the audience to his own view. And maybe the argument from evil is one that you, as the atheist, think is one of the sharpest arrows in your quiver. So we could imagine an episode there where you try to use it to turn the agnostics into atheists like yourself, and I just try to stop you.
Okay.
Let them remain agnostics. I think if I can do that, I'm willing to say the argument doesn't have any real force. That's how I define an argument. In fact, as having a force is its ability to move agnostics on whatever the topic of the argument is out of their agnostic position into some position of positive belief.
So you think that I can't move them from agnosticism to atheism?
Well, the question
Can you move them
the
from
reason I raise that is what strategy would somebody like me use to try to stop you? I mean, your strategy is, first of all, to present the argument and then wait for me to reply. So how would I reply?
Well, so suppose I put it in forms of, look, if you're agnostics, then you should reason to the best explanation of the phenomena you observe, and the existence of God isn't part of that, so don't believe in God. How would you reply to that?
I would reply like a lawyer presenting an alternative theory of the crime. That is an alternative explanation that accounts for the facts as well. And I don't have to, of course, show that this explanation is true or right. Actually, I don't know what's true or right about this. I just assume that there's some good explanation. But I can think of explanations which, if true, seem to me, it would seem to me were pretty good.
Would you buy the one that Augustine puts, that evil is just the deprivation of goodness or rightness, so that it's really not part of what God did to have evil?
No,
that doesn't.
That doesn't work, and that's probably true, I think. But I don't think that works for this particular purpose, because after all, if somebody blows a hole in you, the hole is just a deprivation of your flesh, but it's still something that's very unfortunate.
Let me remind our listeners that you're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about the problem of evil with Professor Peter van Inwagen of the University of Notre Dame, and we're trying to figure out what the arguments pro and con are. John, you want to get in there?
Well, I mean, try another thing out that also comes from Augustine. I don't know originally, but that's the so-called free will defense. That, look, God says, we don't have to figure out what God had in mind. We just have to kind of give a possibility for what he might have had in mind that allows us to understand how the world may have turned out the way it is. Well, one thing he may have had in mind is it's good to have free beings. And a lot of evil is caused by beings exercising their freedom. He could have created a world full of automatons, but that would be a less good world, even if they didn't do anything wrong. Does that argument grab you?
Well, that's an extremely important move, because one of the most difficult aspects of the argument from evil for the theist to deal with is God's omnipotence. He can do anything that maybe isn't in some very strong sense intrinsically possible. But it may be that one of these things that in a very strong sense is intrinsically possible is to ensure how people with free will are going to act. So, yes, it probably, if you want to tell a story that just accounts for the existence of some evil in the world, maybe not tsunamis, maybe not Auschwitz, but some evil, you can at least ascribe it to people's free will. That's an opening. That's a first clause that you might put in some longer document.
Yeah, it's got to be a much longer document, though, Peter, because if I'm the victim of your free will evil and God foresees that and lets you do the evil thing to me, I say, oh, well, grand, you gave Peter free will so he could run over me. But you know what? I'm gonna let some callers in here. Daniel in Oakland's on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Daniel. What's your question or comment?
I just wanted to address the idea of evil as a human aspect. You know, we rarely talk about natural disasters as evil. In fact, the only interpretation I've heard of tsunami in religious terms is that it's a punishment for evil. You know, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of natural evil around. It seems to be mostly man or human-made, which to me is an argument for the idea of free will. That just wanted to get some comments on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks, Daniel.
Thanks a lot. We have a similar point from Elise by email. I think the concept of evil is ethical and moral, not dependent on belief in God. I'm an atheist, and I believe that there is the evil that men do, and there are evil men. Now, Peter, can we step away from religion for a minute, but take the insights of the religious tradition about the whole concept of evil and understand a little bit about what you called the first concept of evil that dwells in the hearts of Hitlers and Jeffrey Dahmers and some other people?
Radical moral.
Yes, evil. Radical moral evil.
Why? Well, what kind of insight do you want? I mean, I recognize that such a thing exists. I don't understand it. I don't know what it would be like to be somebody like that. I mean, it's very hard for me to talk about that as a philosopher. That's easy enough as a religious believer.
Right. No.
As a religious believer, I believe it's because the human species has torn itself out of God's hand and done itself a great deal of damage. I suppose I might take that theological belief of mine and make it part of one of these stories. For philosophical purposes, we can just say, well, here's a possibility.
But you're suggesting, I mean, I think philosophers can talk about anything, and I've heard you talk about a lot of things. Surely the reason for that religious doctrine is there's something to explain. And there's something above and beyond just kind of ineptitude and acting on bad information and not being educated. There's some kind of real evil.
Sure.
That original sin was sort of a explanation of, and help us understand what it would explain.
I think the doctrine of original sin exists antecedently to any attempt to explain evil or to explain radical evil. I think it has different purposes than explaining how there can be such a thing as Hitler. But if you have the doctrine, of course, you can trot it out when somebody asks why there should be such a thing as Hitler. I went rather beyond the doctrine of original sin in what I said too.
Let's
the idea of the human species absolutely ruining itself.
Well, Peter and John, let's let some callers into this conversation. Mohan I'm not sure where you're calling from, Mohan, but in San Francisco. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Mohan. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Well, first of all, I guess I don't want to be too critical, but I didn't see any point at all to the argument that your guest made for the existence of God. But then again, I'm very biased. I'm an atheist. And the answer to your question is, of course, we atheists see good and evil and recognize it. Being an atheist doesn't preclude recognizing that there is evil in the world. And we really, at least speaking for myself, I don't understand what an evil tsunami is. So I guess one of your callers made the point that we think of evil as inflicting suffering of our own free will,
But
so tsunami doesn't generally get counted in that category. And as far as theism and atheism, I think that argument really leads nowhere, because atheists mostly tend to argue against faith and on the basis of logic or science or something like that. And theists simply don't, as was illustrated by your guest when he was arguing with you.
Mohan, I think that's a little bit, but we'll let Peter defend himself. Thanks for the challenge. So Peter, Mohan says he doesn't see an argument. Of course, you didn't really give the argument. You just started to describe the strategy.
I certainly didn't give an argument, as he said, for the existence of God, but maybe that was just a slip of a tongue. I was supposed to be criticizing an argument against the existence of God. That is, and what I was about to say at some point was that, look, if the atheist offers the argument from evil, what I'll do is tell some stories, and I'll hope to get this reaction from the agnostics in the audience. Gee, for all we know, that might be true. Or given that there is a God, the rest of that story might well be true, too. And these would be stories that include both God and evil, perhaps all the different kinds of, forget about the word evil if it doesn't help here, just all the kinds of bad stuff that goes on in the world.
Yeah.
So the question is, can I do that?
Yes. Well, give me an attempt. I mean, I know philosophy takes a long time, but give me an attempt to do that briefly.
Well, just assume that first clause that was the free will defense in the very abstract form you stated it. Human beings have free will, and even God, even an omnipotent being, can't determine how they're going to exercise that free will. So a long time ago, I don't know, 190,000 BC, some such year as that, some early ancestors of ours lived in a state of original felicity, but they used their free will to separate themselves from God, and in doing so ruined themselves, made themselves morally bad agents, and perhaps made themselves, freed themselves from some sort of protection from tsunamis that they might have had when they were in closer union with God.
Yeah.
Now the question, this story is I've gone through very quickly. The question is, with more time, with infinite patience, how plausible can I make that story to a group of, and let's say they're present-day agnostics?
That's a good question. You know what? And to answer that question, maybe our callers can help us see how they would go with this. Okay, welcome, Mark.
Very interesting discussion. I think I agree with Peter that it's very valuable to be able to cast the issue in terms that an agnostic would be moved. I think I can do that. I've been observing human behavior for a long time, wittingly for about 60 years. And I think that the issue of bad things happening needs to distinguish acts of will, typically human will. I don't think the issue of God does anything but confuse the issue here. And within the acts of volition, human responsibility is born.
So your point is free will is required to do bad things that are evil, as opposed to just think, if you might stumble and ruin somebody's lunch, but that's not evil. But if you just go out of your way to do it, that is.
But wait a minute. But I think you're missing something, Mark. I think you're missing something, and Peter acknowledged this earlier, but I think you're missing something. Look, God creates the universe. God institutes the laws of nature. God's the one who made a planet with plate tectonics, with these things moving around and causing earthquakes and washing out the. Let me finish. And washing out the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. For what end? Now this is His universe, according to the theist. His universe, His plan for it. So it's part of His. It's not unintentional. It's not the intentionality of humankind, but it's got to be the intentionality of the Creator, if He's an intentional being. So you're back to tsunamis, by your theistic light, should be evil, and they're a problem for you.
I'm not saying that at all. You keep introducing the God issue of intentionality. I'm saying leave that aside for a moment and look at the distinction between tsunamis and holocausts, human-made suffering and evil and harm. And there actually, I've taken this further to a thesis that there are three underpinnings of all evil, of all human-created harm. Yeah. And those are deceit, intrusion, and the withholding of help when it's needed.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you were. That's right. You did say bracket God, and then we have. Thanks for your call, Marty. Peter, do you want to, Mark? Do you want to comment on that at all?
Okay, well, I would just say it wasn't I that brought God into the conversation. I don't know if I was accused of that or not. That is, I was sitting here believing in God, and somebody presents an argument for His non-existence. And being a philosopher, I'm not willing just to blow it off. I always have to answer when people argue for things that I present arguments for things I disagree with.
Sure.
But we can certainly discuss other. I think that's the most interesting aspect of the problem of evil. But there is this pun on the word evil, bad things versus radical evil. And everybody agrees, nobody disputes that there's bad things, right, except maybe people who would dispute all individuality or thinks everything is an illusion.
Peter, let's take this up a little bit more after the break. I'll remind our listeners, you're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're discussing evil, the problem of evil, what is evil, with Professor Peter van Inwagen of the University of Notre Dame.
If you're in the Bay Area, you can call us at 415-841-4134, 415-841-4134. Otherwise, call our toll-free number at 1-800-525-9917.
And coming up, we'll talk about the rhetoric of evil. Calling someone evil is a really powerful rhetorical device. But is it any more than that? Does it have some basis in reality? Philosophy Talk, we'll be right back.
I want to be evil and cheat at jacks. I want to be wicked. I want to tell lies. I want to be mean and throw mud pies.
Eartha Kitt, and I want to be evil. This is Philosophy Talk. I'm John Perry. I think Eartha Kitt is exhibiting what our guest, Peter van Inwagen, calls the pun on the word evil. I don't think spitting tacks and throwing mud pies are really in the same category as the Holocaust.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is.
He's John Perry, and I'm Ken Taylor. We're talking about evil with Professor Peter van Inwagen of the University of Notre Dame. What do we do when we call someone evil? What exactly are we doing? Join us by calling 415-841-4134. That's 415-841-4134.
And one of the good things about our world is we now have a toll-free number, 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. 9917. You can email us, comments at philosophytalk.org. So you can be part of this conversation in a lot of ways.
We've got lots of callers and lots of emails. You got an email there you want to?
Let me zip through a couple of emails we've gotten from all around the world. Jennifer says, I've been troubled by the following. In Christianity, God required the blood sacrifice of either his son or at the very least a human to atone for the sins of humanity. This doesn't seem like a very nice thing to do. That's not her words, that's mine. Bartley by email. If the primary essential being is spirit, not body, then the understanding shifts. You include reincarnation in your thinking, more can be understood. If God asks for the well-being of the soul, not the body, then death by tsunami might be the experience that the soul needs in order to learn something. Well, those are interesting ideas. Peter was giving us a bit of a story that had to do with, look, how, if man had alienated himself from God, of his own free will, which God couldn't control, having decided to make man free. That's the beginning of a story that lots of Christians find pretty plausible.
But Peter, help me understand that story a little bit more, though. I know we know you can't do it as long as a conversation you would like, but I say, well, God's the designer. He's got the plan, and he lets the plan be hostage to our merely imperfect, finite wills. Well, what's up with that? How can his plan be hostage to us in this way?
Well, even an omnipotent being, as I said, can't control the actions of beings with free will, so you have to ask yourself, I think you should ask the question in this form, why is free will so important to him?
Yeah.
Of course he can't control things with free will, but why would he create things with free will? Well, possibly because free will is, some people see it as good in itself. Other people would say, well, it might be necessary for something that is good. Love, for example, you can't love somebody unless you choose freely to unite yourself with that person.
So I'm this agnostic, and I'm keeping an open mind here, and I like your story so far, but one thing worries me about it, which is couldn't people have free will and yet not be so good at carrying out their plans? I mean, couldn't Hitler freely decide to kill 6 million Jews, but God not allow him to really be so good at it as he was, so that he only ends up killing a couple dozen?
Well, you imagine the rebels entering a village bent on ethnic cleansing. They've got their rifles there. I mean, what's going to happen? Do the bullets turn into whipped cream in the air?
Well,
does everybody suddenly turn invisible?
Well, God works in mysterious ways. Hey, I want to shift this conversation.
Yeah, well, there's no room for a mysterious way when somebody's spraying you with machine gun
fire.
If something saves you, it's going to be pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I want to shift this conversation a little bit. You know, Osama bin Laden calls us evil. I read this morning his letter to America from last year. It was powerful stuff. Half of it sounded like the ravings of a lunatic, but half of it sounded really powerful criticisms of America, American foreign policies, American place in the world. He calls us evil. George Bush calls him evil, right? What does that do? They're like implacably opposed to each other, right? Evil is something you have to resist, you can't compromise with, you have to extinguish. Now, but the question you might ask is, isn't that just a rhetorical device to express your opposition to another? Who knows who's right here?
That's why it goes back to Amy Stanton's psychiatrist, who said, look, it's just a way of rationalizing our resentment for other people so that we don't even have to consider what their motives or judgments were. We just treat them as something beyond. But I don't know. I think some people ought to be treated beyond.
Well, I assume you believe, Peter, I'm not sure if you believe independently of the existence of God. Or some people think the presence of evil depends on the existence of God because it's contrary to God's will. Some people believe, well, even if there isn't God, there's real evil. Well, I mean, what do you think? Is there like an objective fact, or is calling somebody evil just a rhetorical move with a certain kind of place in your own, reaction?
I think it's an objective fact. And of course, as to George Bush and Osama, there are certainly things that they call each other that are perfectly objective, where they. But like, say, being responsible for the conflict in the Middle East, for example, or in Iraq, each one thinks the other is responsible.
Yeah.
For that.
And
causally responsible.
Yeah, and we think there's a fact of the matter that can be settled.
Right, there's a fact of the matter. So, I mean, the fact that there's this disagreement doesn't prove there's no fact of the matter.
Shirley in Berkeley wants to weigh in this conversation. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Shirley.
Hi, I've been thinking about this since the beginning of the show when a caller or somebody made the comment that, using the term evil helps us to deal with the conflicting feelings of anger. And
Yeah.
I agree with that to some extent, but I would think, to me, it's more the inability to understand, what you were just saying, to understand somebody else's motives or rationale. And so calling something evil allows us to just label it, box it, decide that it's not me, I don't have to understand, I'm not going to try to figure it out, and just compartmentalize it and put it away so that we don't have to worry about it. And
Sure.
maybe not.
Shirley, do you think that that's all it is? I mean, do you think, it clearly has that force, but is that the only point? I mean, is there an objective truth about who's evil and who isn't, on your view?
Yeah, but I think that having a word that we can use gives us the comfort of feeling like we understand it even though we don't. There are many words that give us the illusion that we are understanding something that we actually do not.
I think one thing that the word evil has done in the dialectic of thinking about the Holocaust is it sometimes allows us to localize the problem with this one person, Hitler, or Hitler and a few of his henchmen. Actually, historically, if you look at anti-Semitism throughout Europe over the ages, you can say it was almost inevitable that at some point, or not inevitable, at least not surprising that at some point some real crackpot whose views maybe weren't that different than the culture in which he was enmeshed got a hold of power and did something horrible. But to look at it as localized in one person, the word evil helps say, he was just different than the rest of us. But
Right.
it was really, he's just a manifestation of his culture.
Well, Peter, let me ask you one last question, because we're getting kind of to the bottom of our conversation with you. But, along this line, this is an empirical question more than a philosophical question. But do you think evil is mostly misused in our rhetoric, or is it mostly used correctly? Just as a being living in the world. There is this thing of, George Bush using the axis of evil to rally the American populace. Is that mostly how we use evil, do you think?
It's certainly often misused. I wouldn't want to get into cases, but certainly, excuse me, it's often, I think, correctly used. There's no question with the Nazi inner circle or with Pol Pot or something like that you're dealing with something that, as the last caller said, we don't understand. We don't understand the inner life of such people. We do understand what they did. We take the position that no possible inner life could excuse this. To understand, if we could understand it, would not excuse it. That such people simply have to be, locked up.
Yeah. That's where so if you say, when we call something evil, we profess not to understand it, not to recognize the inner life as a possible inner life for beings like us or something. And that's where the implacable opposition from it must come. Is that they kind of go together, right?
Such a thing is a reality, but such realities are a permanent temptation to abuse rhetorical abuse by people who use the word for them.
Yeah, I think you're right there. On that note, we're gonna have to say goodbye. It's been a pleasure having you, Peter. Our guest has been Peter van Inwagen of University of Notre Dame. His book, The Problem of Evil, will be published soon by Oxford University Press. Peter, thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Peter. I look forward to your book coming out, and it'll be a good read and a challenge, I'm sure. Thanks a lot.
So, John, we learned about evil today. This is a wide-ranging conversation.
I've talked about the problem of evil and theism to friends. It was one. It's a problem that, as I say, has an existential impact in my life. I've been a theist. I've been an agnostic. I've been an atheist over the years. But to me, it's a real problem. I remember I had a conversation with another one of the most eminent philosophers of religion of the day, along with Peter van Inwagen, and that's Robert M. Adams of Yale University. But when we were both graduate students, and we must have argued for 4 or 5 hours, and finally, I kept saying, "Well, what did God have in mind?" And and he kept saying, "Well, why do you expect to know what God had in mind, you finite creature?"
Yeah,
and he finally said, "Perry, you're just constantly committing the sin of pride." And I think sometimes with philosophical arguments, that's kind of the level you have to come down to. you're not going to be able to shove someone out of their antecedent position. Peter makes a very good case. Take a neutral person, agnostic. What could you do with him? But
see, I actually don't think it's the strong case, because I think you can take an agnostic and say, okay, look, we're not just talking about some God or other. We're talking about a supremely good, supremely powerful God who is providential, who is the guiding force behind human. He's got a plan. Right? So this free will argument, what does it say? It says, well, he doesn't really have a plan. Well, he's not going to make the plan happen because he makes it dependent upon us. He knows that we're fallible and imperfect. So this perfect God makes a plan that's supposed to be a perfect plan. I don't think it makes any sense. I don't think, unless you already believe it, I don't think you get the first base with the agnostic, to tell you the truth.
Well, there's all kinds of positions in between. My favorite philosopher is Hume. Hume said he could think of 4 explanations for the mixture of good and evil. And one was that there was good and evil were both positive forces warring. That's a Manichaean era. He said that doesn't work. You'd have a lot of evil one place, a lot of good in another place, and we just kind of have it mixed all over the place. And his hypothesis, although he's often thought to be the atheist, that's not what he says. His hypothesis is, well, there is an intelligence that created our universe, but it just doesn't care. It doesn't really have any emotions. It doesn't care about the good or ill of humans. Either way, it's not trying to cause them problems, not trying to help them out. Yeah,
last thing I'll say is I think, look, this problem about the rhetoric of evil, I think it's more deep than we said, because Osama bin Laden is convinced and kind of rational that we're just evil, and Bush is convinced and kind of rational that Osama's just evil. And who's the authority to decide?
Well, I think Peter's distinction is important. We all do bad things, and in that sense, we can all understand that sense of evil.
Right. But you know what? We can't settle this now. But you can log onto our website, and we'll continue this conversation. And now, here to wrap up the hour is the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholl. St. Augustine had put the problem of evil in a nutshell. Either God cannot abolish evil, or he will not. If he cannot, then he is not all-powerful. If he will not, then he is not all-good. This is part of the thorny problem the 18th century philosopher Gottfried Leibniz identified as theodicy. Leibniz posed it this way: if God were all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, then this world would be the best possible world. But surely this world is not the best possible world. Thus, God is not all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. Regarding the second premise, Leibniz says that we may think of parts of the world as flawed, but we don't know what the world would be like without them. Removing them might make things even worse. And how do we judge perfection? By human happiness? Leibniz argued that that was parochial. What about the happiness of all sentient beings? For all we know, sentient beings on Earth might be just a drop in the ocean of sentient beings, angels, extraterrestrials. Even if God had stopped 9/11, say, by miraculously making the planes vanish into thin air, that would violate the physical laws of the universe God put into place. According to Leibniz, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, so there is nothing that can prevent God from creating the best world. God's perfection obliges God to create the best world. Therefore, the actual world is the best world. As to evil itself, Leibniz named 3 types: moral, the evil actions humans commit; physical, hurricanes and fatal diseases; and metaphysical, the imperfect. Leibniz argued that metaphysical evil, or imperfection, is itself part of perfection. If God is perfect, God's creations are therefore not. They can't be. There are degrees. A worm is less perfect than a bird, and a human is less than an angel. If absolute imperfection is 0 and God is 1, all created things fall in between. Variety is maximized, and if evil is created, it's by those who either do not know or will not recognize that this is the best of all possible worlds. The choice is ours. Best of all possible worlds or not, Leibniz came under the cold gaze of Voltaire, who turned him into the foolish optimist Pangloss in his great satire Candide, which is full of earthquakes, war, rape, and the other nastiness that the world engenders. If this is the best of all possible worlds, Voltaire wrote, what then are the others? Poor Leibniz. I guess that's the thanks you get when you try to give perfection a boost. I gotta go.
Wow, Ken, my head is dizzy from 60 seconds of rapid-fire philosophy.
If your head is dizzy, that means you've got a conundrum in your mind, and we can solve it for you, can't we, John?
Yes. Go to our webpage,
conundrums@philosophytalk.org, or hit that conundrums button on the webpage. We won't promise to solve your problem. Actually, I promise we won't solve it, but we will give you lots of new ways to think about it.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University.
Our executive producer is Gordon Earl.
Special thanks to Dave Fusaro, Nicole Sawaya, Ben Temshin, and Alan Farley.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the Pacific Division of the American Philosophical Association and from various groups at Stanford Stanford University.
And even more support from the Friends of Philosophy Talk and from the members of KALW Information Radio San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our funders.
The conversation continues on our website, www.philosophytalk.org. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.